Happy Halloween. My name is Ben Friedman, and today I'm reviewing a film that I got the chance to see early. It is Memoir of a Snail, which is a film out of Australia. It is a stop-motion animated film described as a tragic comedy directed by Adam Elliott. This film has been in the conversation, I should say, for Oscars, and I had heard quite a bit about this. I had not really been aware of this movie's existence until July when I had done a power rankings for animation movies, and I kept hearing in the comments, Ben, why didn't you talk about Memoir of a Snail? Ben, what about Memoir of a Snail? And I'm like, what the hell is Memoir of a Snail? I got the chance to see this movie, got to hear why this movie's been the center of such praise and what makes this movie special and unique, because Memoir of a Snail is a very special and unique movie. I'm just going to go over this movie briefly. The film's plot, which is loosely inspired by Elliott's own life, follows the trials and tribulations in the life of lonely misfit Grace Puddle from childhood to adulthood. Essentially, Grace is this character who has a really troubled upbringing. Her mom dies at childbirth. She's raised by her loving father who's suffering from alcohol abuse. She has this twin brother played by Cody Smith-McPhee, and they're going through life, and she's someone who quite literally, like a snail, is like in her shell. She really is interested, fascinating, loves snails because, you know, she resembles one in her own mind. She loves this idea of going into protection. And then when life just becomes harder and harder, she has to learn to essentially break out of the shell. And the drama of this movie is, will she learn that lesson? And this movie is an R-rated animated film. And I want to make this clear. Do not take the kiddos to see Memoir of a Snail. This movie has a lot of raunchy ideas, a lot of adult theme and subject matters, and weirdly, a lot of stop motion nudity. Memoir of a Snail is especially one of the most unique films that I saw. And I want to just start off with some praise. Sarah Snook, the star of Succession. The Succession cast has been doing some great work this year with Kieran Culkin in Real Pain, with Jeremy Strong in The Apprentice. Sarah Snook is also going to be in the Academy conversation because Memoir of a Snail will definitely get nominated for Best Animated Feature, may even have an outside chance to win. But Snook is very well utilized in this movie. It's able to capture I wouldn't say sarcasm per se, but it is able to capture a very specific comedic sensibility that Snook is very well equipped to do in this movie. And for some actresses, this Grace character could become really overbearing and you don't want to spend time, or you don't really care about this character's endeavors or interest. It becomes too much. Sarah Snook puts just the right amount of emphasis on this character and allows this to have a balance of funny, relatable, and pushes your buttons at times. I think it's a really well done performance from her, as is the performance of her twin brother in the movie, Gilbert, as voiced by Cody Smith-McPhee. He is also very well utilized in this movie, and everything about this movie really works. The stop motion animation, one of the things that it's best used for is the meticulousness of it. Stop motion, since you're quite literally doing it frame by frame, animating it that way, every emotion, every feeling has to be mapped out. So this movie, you really feel the emotion of this movie. I just realized that this video will not be posting on Halloween. This is really embarrassing. But anyway, back to Memoir of a Snail. There was a lot to really like about it. The animation style of this movie really captures the stillness and meticulousness of it, and thus all the drama is heightened within this movie, which services the overall ideas of life and pain of life in this movie in a really clever, thoughtful way, and the animation really excels at that. It is a very heartfelt movie. It is a movie that wears emotion on its sleeve, and it is a movie that is not afraid at emotionally manipulating its audiences in some case, where it's just like, this movie is a dour film to watch. I will fully admit, when I watched this movie a few days ago, it left me in a really weird mood by the end of it. Like, I really struggled with this movie by the end, where it left me in such a, at times, dark mindset, really had me reflecting on my own life. It was a pretty powerful and harrowing experience that we see this character of Grace going through, and there's certainly a lot relatable to it. I will say that that experience wasn't necessarily one that I enjoyed going through, especially the day that I was going through. I don't think I was emotionally equipped for this movie when I saw this movie. And that is not a criticism of the movie. It is just quite literally a fact of how I reacted to the movie watching it. There is some things that I really struggled with this movie overall, because I think Memoir of a Snail is a movie that I would describe as admiring more than I liked it. And there is a lot to admire about this movie, especially with the animation, especially with the heavy subject matters that this film is trying to approach. Some of the criticisms I would have of this movie is this movie really is dour and tough to watch in a way that at points, and it's lucky that this movie is only 90 minutes, because had this movie gone on any longer, it's a tough hang. And while watching the movie, it just kind of feels like every 5 to 10 minutes, it stops and you experience something very sad. And then it keeps going. And then the next 5 to 10 minutes, you experience something really sad. And then that's just kind of the pattern for 90 minutes. And it becomes a little overbearing by the end of it, where I was just like, oh God, okay, do I have to keep watching it? Like, I really did struggle with that. And that's, again, not necessarily a criticism of the film. It's how I reacted watching this movie and how it left me feeling. I would very much describe Memoir of a Snail as a movie that I admired and I don't need to rewatch again. There is certainly a lot of beauty in it. There is a little bit of humor that I found to just become very repetitive, same way that it's just beat after beat of a dourness. This movie has jokes that it kind of keeps coming back to. There is this kind of running joke of Grace learning something in her life. Maybe it's something sexual, maybe it's some sort of sex act or anything like that. And then it kind of does oh, well, when I was younger, I thought this sex act meant this. And they do that joke a few times in the movie. There is a level of raunch to this movie that didn't bother me. I felt it being raunchy, though. Like, it didn't feel necessarily that the raunch was natural to what this movie was trying to do. I think some people would say that makes the movie more relatable, and I could certainly understand it. I felt it to be a bit forced at times and was really like, oh, okay, here's this point of the movie where we're going to show a naked grandma in it. Again, some people are really going to like that. Some people are really going to respond to the humor. I wasn't offended by the humor. It didn't really bother me. I did just notice it where I was like, oh, this movie's really hitting this joke right now. Or, oh, this movie's really hitting this imagery and playing with this stop motion R-rated that it's doing right now. And I didn't find it to be particularly impactful, though I don't think it took away from the experience per se. With that all said, I mean, there is certainly a lot to praise about Memoir of a Snail. This movie does have a really beautiful story of survival and going through the toughest times. And we see this Grace character just go through hard times. And it's not hard times in the sense of, like, I think when I describe it, someone thinks that this movie is going to be about Grace and she's in a war zone and, like, all these terrible things happen to her while in war. It's not that. This movie is about the everydayness of life. And especially for a person like this, who is a foster child, essentially, at some point in her life, and she's taken away from her brother. And this movie is all about reuniting with family, and finding your own family. And it's a very powerful story. So I think people are going to really find emotional resonance in that. I think the more you relate to this movie, obviously, the better it's going to be. Watching this movie, there is a lot of those really heavy themes in this movie. And, like, there are very harrowing scenes throughout. I'm trying to think. There's a moment that happens in basically what kickstarts the second act, where we get from the first to the second. Like, there's a moment that really changes the dynamic of all the characters. And this movie, you can always kind of feel a sense of dread. Like, this movie isn't one that kind of gradually builds you into, oh, this is not going to be a happy movie per se. Right from the first minute, you're like, oh, I kind of get the tone that this movie is going to be. Some people are going to notice that tone right away, and they're just going to disconnect. It is going to be a full-on, I don't want to spend time with this. I don't want to be in this world right now. I'm just kind of out. And I totally understand it. I actually think it's a logical, I think it's a reasonable, I think it's a emotionally healthy thing to do, is to watch this movie and few minutes in just realize, nope, this is not a movie that I can handle right now. This is not a movie that I need to see. This is not a movie that I can relate to. This is not a movie that I just need to spend time with right now. That I totally understand. And I totally empathize with those relations to the movie, because honestly, at times during this movie, I was like, do I want to turn this movie off? The beauty of this movie outmarks any of my criticisms of this movie, and I think it is a really well done piece of art. And just because something is a well done piece of art doesn't necessarily mean that I am emotionally affected by it. With the emotional beats that I'm talking about in this film that I mentioned earlier, I noticed it having kind of the opposite effect for me, where I really did feel my emotions being toyed with in a way that I just didn't enjoy having them. And I'm usually someone who can cry really easily in movies. This one never got me, and I think it is just because I felt my emotions being pulled, and I felt the, if you want to call it emotional manipulation, I would call it storytelling and artistry of this movie, but I also understand why someone would label that term on it. But ultimately, it is a good movie. I would recommend you watch it. It is very well done, and there is a lot to take away. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. There is a lot of truth about humanity and how we self-identify, how the prisons that we set oneself in. This movie is about the walls that we build around ourselves to set us up for our failure. That is self-inflicted. That is essentially what it is. And it is a character study of watching someone either be trapped in there or move past it. It is a really unique, really well done movie from Adam Elliott that I will recommend, even though, of course, I had some hesitations, and I do give that warning of what people may have with this movie. With that all said, Memoir of a Snail, I'm going to go 3.5 out of 5 stars for Memoir of a Snail. It is ultimately worthy of the praise that it is receiving. So with that all said, thank you so much for watching. Apologies that I'm in a Wario costume, even though this video will not be coming out on Halloween. But thank you all so much for watching. Take care. And if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more.